We're here in Michigan, in northern Michigan, and the way I look at water, it's really the lifeblood of our community. It's the economy, it's about the social fabric, it's about the quality of life, and we need it for everything we do.
I work in water because I think that it's really important. I think that growing up in a place that has a lot of natural beauty and that is surrounded by lakes, I've been able to find an appreciation for water, and I like to be able to convey that for other people, and I really have this exuberance, and I hope that other people feel that and understand that. As far as water, I tell them that it's the #1 influence on your daily life. From the minute that you wake up in the morning to the end of your day, you're using water whether you realize it or not. You drive your car, you're using water to make the fuels for your car. You're taking a shower, that's directly using water.
Water is important for many reasons, and I think that in Traverse City we have a unique way of seeing water. We look out our doors, our windows, and we see a beautiful bay, and we see enormously valuable blue-colored water, and I think that we get a little bit challenged with our viewpoints on water here versus other parts of the world. We see it in a different light. We see it in a different aspect, and so.
I come from a different nation where I work with people of low-income families, and when you look at water from that perspective, the issue of availability, access is huge, and the issue of health, of safety, drinking safe water. So I came here and I look at this amazing body of water that surrounds us and all the lakes that are inland, and it was, you know, hard to believe there's a water issue here when I came from a place where you could have water, and if you have it, you're concerned about your safety.
In parts of the United States, like the Great Lakes, we have the lion's share of the fresh water that's available. And so if we look at how our perception is, we don't think of it as whether we're going to have it from our tap. I don't know that anyone could ever really consider turning on their tap and not having water flow out, unless you run on a pump or a well system and your power's out. But the fact the water wouldn't come out is something that I don't think anyone could fathom here in the United States. You go to other parts of the world and that's an everyday occurrence. In fact, you are more used to water not coming out of your tap or not being available or not being clean.
I'm not well hydrated, I don't think well. If I don't have water over a couple of day period, I start to die, I start to dry up, quite literally. And so we live on the water planet. Our planet is blue for a reason. Our planet is blue because that's where the life is. Water is life.
Water is life. It is the essence of who we are. You know, we're made up of, what, 70% water. And, you know, I think in the 21st century, this will be the new oil.
Should care about water. Well, #1 is about 1/5 of America's economy relies on water. So if we don't have enough water, if we don't have enough water in the Mississippi, our trade stops, our barge traffic stops. If our water is polluted in the Mississippi, if our water is polluted, then what happens downstream? Then New Orleans water is polluted, and it costs more money, it takes more effort to deliver drinking water for an entire city.
I think in the U.S. we understand what our cell phone bills are or our cable bills are much more than what our water bill is. And the fact that we don't understand the value of just what it takes to bring that water to our tap and what the real cost is, and that we're really not that concerned about it, is how it's very different than other parts of the world.
I really got interested in water as a young journalist. My very first story I did was a radio story chasing Jacques Cousteau and the Calypso, his research vessel, when they were on Lake Superior. And my mother driving me along the shore, and we're trying to find the Calypso. And I had a microphone and I was interviewing people along the way. And so I grew up on the Great Lakes. I would swim every day in the summertime. And so when I looked around, and I also covered some water issues on the Mississippi and other parts of the world as a young journalist. And so when I looked around to see what is the big story of the 21st century that was not being covered, this big story that affects all of us, that no one was really putting together the pieces, and that was water. That is the global freshwater crisis.
The water demands are supposed to double by 2035, and half of that consumptive water use will be allocated towards energy production and extraction.
Water and energy are interwoven beyond anyone's imagination. You cannot produce energy without using water. To get water to our homes takes an enormous amount of energy. California's energy grid, 20% of that goes to just pushing water from the north to the south. So a very large state that requires a fifth of its total energy use just to move water. So whether you're searching or exploring for new energy or you're creating new energy, water is critical.
Pretty soon I realized that everybody has water issues. And of course, water sustains life, so that's one of the reasons why it's so important. But it's also the cause of deadly disease, and it's also the cause of conflict. And so if you look at water, you can connect it to everything that's important to human beings. And in particular, in our program, from an educational perspective, it's the source of the most interesting questions about life.
We have the Great Lakes, which is 20% of the world's surface water. So we should be concerned about the Great Lakes because about 30 million people get their water, their drinking water, from the Great Lakes. So just a few tiny pieces why America should be concerned about water at home. But then also abroad, when you bring water, say when the U.S. invests in foreign policy that helps a developing country bring safe water to their children, to their population, then what happens? It's an amazing thing. It's like watering a garden. When you bring safe water to a village in Africa or in Bangladesh, where children actually thrive rather than walking miles to carry what's probably dirty, contaminated water, they're healthier, the children go to school. It's an amazing transformation. Population levels actually start to decline because children are going to school, they're being educated, they have a future, families have less children because their survival rate is greater.
I think that it is going to take leadership from the government, both at the state and the federal level, but it also is going to be kind of a bottom-up movement where people will actively work through citizen groups and lobby their governments also, demanding better conservation, efficiency, and this examination of consumptive water uses. And if people start connecting the dots, they're going to realize that water use is inextricably linked to energy use.
I definitely think that academics play a big role. I think that the news plays a big role, and I think that policymakers play a big role. And I think that whoever can design a way to get those three groups to better convey information to the public is going to really knock it out of the park, because I think that it really takes a combination of those. We need people researching, we need people conveying that information to the public, but also we need the policymakers to be listening. And I think that developing a model to get all three people to converse better amongst themselves, but also to convey that to the public better, is really going to be able to help solve and find the solutions to our water crisis.
The relationship between water and energy is closely tight-knit.
Without water, we wouldn't be able to properly harness most of the energy we use to power our appliances or to fuel our vehicles.
Circle of Blues' Carl Ganser and Keith Schneider further explained the water-energy nexus.
Energy cannot be produced without tremendous amount of water, the way we use energy today, the way we generate energy. So electrical generation, coal-fired power plants and nuclear-fired power plants, which produce 60% of our nation's electricity, are huge water users. In fact, they take in more water for cooling than any other industry in the country. About half the water that we withdraw from lakes and rivers are used by nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants. We can reduce that by going to renewable energy that doesn't use water, like wind and solar, photovoltaic solar. But that is a minor piece of our electrical generating capacity today. We still have, as most of our generating capacity, plants that need to be cooled, thermoelectric plants that need a tremendous amount of water to both produce the steam, to run the generators, and to cool the equipment.
In the U.S., spring 2013, we're already seeing signs of serious drought across the U.S. Now that serious drought, that's aquifer levels in the central United States. Where do we grow most of our grains, most of our irrigated grains or irrigated corn? That's in the central United States. So what happens when aquifer levels, when wells start going dry, our farms start drying up. We start having huge challenges for farmers, for those who raise livestock, for those producing food, for those in the commodities markets. You start to have ripple effects. If you have a major drought in an area where river flows drop, what happens with generating power? Power plants, nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants, many of them, most of them, need water to cool themselves. If they can't get that water, what happens? They have to shut down.
10 to 20% of all water use in every country in the world goes for industry, and about 5 to 10%, depending, is for municipal use, so what you actually use at home for your bath, for your shower, for cooking. And so water is used for everything, and I think that people don't realize that. There's a term, it's called virtual water. And virtual water is the water that's associated with the products that you use every day that don't necessarily have a direct correlation to water. So for example, brushing your teeth has a direct correlation to water. You can measure how much water you're using, so you think about that. But virtual water would be more like, okay, so I had a hamburger for lunch. How much water did it take to produce that hamburger?